Yes, that is better. Merci, mon ami. Wait, where are we here? Eric, do you start or do I start? Okay, you start.
Okay. For those of you who don't know us, my name's Eric.
My name's Amanda.
And we are former and current president of the UC Lit, so that's why we're here taking over for Emil. I don't know where he went.
He's hiding.
He's in the back. Okay. So we have a few more questions that we'll be sort of taking turns with. And I guess I'll be starting us off. Okay. So this question is for the presidential candidates. So University College, like every other college and professional faculty student government on campus, except for Trinity, operates, because they're Trinity, operates as a representative democracy, not a direct democracy. So there's an important difference here. So while student government is important, and student engagement is important, we ultimately must adhere to our constitution in our daily operations. So how does UC status as a representative democracy, along with the feasibility requirements that follow from this representative status, fit into University College for you? Seeing as we simply don't have the logistical mechanisms in place to operate as a direct democracy, such as Trinity's Board of Stewards, which helps them in that sense, and our meetings are long enough as it is, which create accessibility barriers to students, how can you foster student engagement while still making sure council is operating efficiently? Sorry, very long question.
Okay, hello. So this would just eliminate that. And this isn't just hot air. Vic has done this, Faculty of Music has done this, and as Eric said, Trinity operates as a direct democracy. Now, I am not proposing that we operate as a direct democracy. Trinity has a lot of problems operating as a direct democracy, specifically with turnout. What I am suggesting is that if a student wants to come to one of our meetings and have their voice heard, they should know where the meeting is, they should know when the meeting is, and they should be able to do so without these barriers to communication and these barriers to accessibility. Now, one of the concerns raised was what if a student comes to our meeting and filibusters the entire time? In my opinion, well, A filibuster wouldn't really happen in a lit meeting because the speaker would maintain control, but B, if a student feels strongly enough about something that they want to come to our meeting and stand up and speak to council at length on this, then we shouldn't stifle their student voice. We should listen to them. I think every student should have the right to do that as well. I'm not against a representative democracy. The Lit is a representative democracy. Canada is a representative democracy, and it's good and it works. But I'm not suggesting that we become a direct democracy. What I'm saying is the students would be able to speak, but those elected would still be the ones voting. This isn't taking power away from the elected representatives. This is giving power to the students to be able to share their opinions and share what they want to see. So.
Okay, so I think first of all, it is important we get as many students to come out of as many of our meetings as possible. It's important to get that word out, and we encourage they're always open to all UC students, and we encourage them to come out. So we are currently direct democracy, representational democracy, not like Trin. And so how that works, and the reason why we're representational democracy, is that we elect, as UC, council members to represent, to be the voices of students. So, when you guys elect your core exec members and your execs and your reps, you're voting for us to represent your voices and bring whatever your concerns are to the table and bring that up at the meetings and vote on that. So that's the first sort of point. In general, so instead of jumping the gun and giving everyone speaking rights, because it might give an issue to if many people come out, our meetings are very lengthy, so they go sometimes to 4, 5, 6 hours. I think we've had even longer ones sometimes. So if those meetings get even lengthier, if more people come out, it becomes an issue of accessibility, and things don't progress as efficiently as we need them to be, or it would just basically take up all of our Sundays to get those meetings through. Again, we still encourage any and all members to come out and give their and voice their concerns or opinions on any specific agenda items. But the thing I want to stress here is that the Lit has many other avenues for students to sort of voice their opinions in different kinds of ways, and I want to work on advertising that more and making that more clear to students. So that means our AGM, our town halls, and all the regular monthly commission meetings. So those tackles very specific issues that concern mostly society members in general, and that's the avenues where UC students and society members are, where they should be giving their voices most, right? And those are the issues that concern them on a regular basis.
Okay, yeah, so just a reminder to try and keep your answers short. We are timing, but we're not enforcing it.
We're going to say 90 seconds, and we'll cut you off at 2 minutes. Or we'll
Well, how about let's have the thing go off at
okay, I can do it.
like 2 minutes,
I can try to do that.
and then stop them at like 3 minutes?
Can we get like a hand signal when it's like?
Okay, how about
I'll
hand
just keep
signal?
this up. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
then
but you
I'll-
can't see that from all the way over there.
I can see it. It's not and like
I got it.
All right. Okay. So my question is for the presidential candidates. Sorry, guys, you aren't getting a question. So when you are on hiring committee, part of your job will be to send emails to unsuccessful candidates for positions. So say after you send one of these emails, the candidate sends back an email voicing their concern about how the hiring process was inequitable and they felt they were not given a fair chance. How do you respond to this situation? And I guess we can start with Ramsey this time since that's the last one.
Okay, fantastic question. So, having worked with Amanda this year, I've seen very similar situations come up like that regularly. It's going to happen as a president. It's going to happen to core exec members. So the first thing to do in this kind of situation is contact that person. They did contact you saying, okay, these are my concerns, and I feel like it's very inequitable. So you set up a nice individual meeting with that person, just one-on-one, and you talk to them and listen to their concerns as to what exactly they found about the process to be inequitable. So whatever it is, it's very important to listen to those specific concerns. You then take those concerns back as well, and you set up a meeting with the hiring committee as well as the SLC, who's part of the hiring committee, and even the Equity and Outreach Commission in this case, to provide their input on being inequitable here, and they could give their feedback on that. So you take it back, you explain the situation, you have to talk about it as a team here, and then you're gonna have to address their concerns whatever way it is. If they find it to really be inequitable, and like if the committee finds it to be inequitable, then we may have to restart, or we have to start from scratch. We may have to change the way we go about our hiring. In general, though, it's gonna suck, and it's gonna happen a lot as president. But you're gonna have to send those very, very difficult emails to candidates. Like they may be some of your closest friends, and you're gonna have to tell them. And they may say it's inequitable, but you have to tell them this is sort of what the hiring committee has decided, and this is what we have discussed, and this is sort of what we concluded in the end at the end of it. And not treat any concerns like they give us lightly at all. Like you gotta make sure you address them correctly. But it's like eventually one way or another someone's gonna be disappointed, and we have to make sure it's done equitably and like professionally in the end.
Okay, so my answer here is actually going to be very similar to Ramsey's. And for the record, a lot of our answers have been similar because we share a lot of the same opinions. We both been on council for a while. We both know how everything works. But getting to the answer, as you see the president, you do have to make tough choices. And part of that is hiring, choosing who to hire, choosing who not to hire, and having to deliver that bad news. And like Ramsey's answer, if someone thinks that it's inequitable, then they can appeal that decision to me. We will bring it back to hiring. We will collaborate. We will discuss. And if hiring stands by their initial decision, then unfortunately there's not much we can do. But the point here, if a student has a real issue with the way that hiring is done, is to listen to them. And if the student body in general has a real issue with the way hiring is done, then it's our job as representatives of them to do our very best to reform that process, to make it more equitable, and to collaborate with the UC students and with the committee at large.
Thank you. Okay, this is a question for all candidates. This one is a tough question. This one's coming directly from me. It's hard-hitting, but it needs to be asked. So, having served as, sorry. Um, okay, so having served as all of your positions except for Snow, but I know how owners finances, I can directly relate to each of you and each of your current portfolios, as well as the portfolio for which you are currently buying. The presidential role is incredibly burdensome in a whole number of ways, so financially, mentally, emotionally, but most important, academically. So simply put, you cannot remain as president of the LIT, and you can't remain on council without remaining in good academic standing first. We saw this happen last year when Leo Chen was president, and that whole situation devolved. For those of you in the room who know what happened. I won't get into it now, but simply put, it is stated in our constitution that you need to be in good academic standing in order to be on the LIT, and we can't get around that. So how do you plan on prioritizing your academics to ensure that you are allowed to serve as president? How can you balance your time effectively? And given each of your current academic standings, how can you assure the UC community that is present here today that we won't be faced with a situation like we were last year?
Balance the two out. I've been on council for ever since my first year as first year rep, and then as SEC and now as finance. I would weigh them, I would say equally, but I would definitely not let go of my academics. And the thing with my position is that they're kind of relevant to one another because I'm studying accounting, so the good part is I can kind of integrate it, like things I learned, I can add it to my position. And so I think for me it might be a little different because what I learned in school is something that I can apply to my position. So all in all, I'm pretty positive that I want to do well and graduate and get a good GPA, and I wouldn't make my grades detrimental to the situation.
Okay, so having worked on the UTSU for the last year, I am pretty good at managing like multiple commitments, and my academics are one of them. So going into the VP role, I will be stepping back from some other areas that I'm involved in campus, the UTSU being one, but there are other areas. So I would be prioritizing a lot of time from other extracurriculars that I would have been doing onto the VP role, and that wouldn't be taking too much from my academic time. Also, in regards to the situation with the past president, there have been policies in place that are now enacted that stop that from happening. The specific policy being that if you're on academic probation, you can't run in a lit election. I won't get into too much specifics out of respect for the person that this happened to in the past, but that policy in itself would stop someone from having to leave UC while still being in an elected position. So it would stop the scenario from coming up. So on top of that, I think that I do manage my time well enough, and I think I'm doing well enough in my academics that this won't be a specific issue for me. But I want to stress that there is a policy in place, and this issue has already been addressed with the formal policy.
Thank you. Another great question. As the current University and Academic Affairs Commissioner, I pride myself in academics. That's why we're all here. That's why we chose University of Toronto, a very academics-heavy, very academics-oriented school. Since I came to U of T, I've bounced around a lot between different majors, between different subject posts, and finally, recently, I've managed to settle on something that I know I'm good at, that I know I'm passionate about. And in fact, next year, I've already been set up to do an independent research project under a professor. So I take my academics extremely seriously. In fact, during campaigning, when I wasn't online, when I wasn't going around to the different houses, to the CSC, to common rooms, to the JCR, etc., I was working on my thesis for one of my 2 20-page essays that are due right after the campaign, so that's fun. But throughout my 3 years on the LIT, I've really learned how to juggle. I've learned.
So all of us are currently not obviously in academic probation because that policy would have prevented us from running. But what's really important to note is that going into the year as president, you're gonna be hit with everything. It's basically a full-time job on its own, and your grades are gonna try its best to take a hit. And I've really learned that as well at being VP this year. So aside from having organized my time in very strategic little ways, I've been throughout the year learning and adapting new habits and strategies as to how to better keep up with my grades, or how to better tackle my academics while doing this big full-time job, basically. Furthermore, I've been working very closely with the president, Amanda. For those of you who don't know, she's basically a master at this. She's been helping her, as well as an academic advisor I've been seeing regularly. I've been actually also helping me develop tactics and strategies that best tackle how I learn best, right? Currently, I hover around a 3.0 GPA with all the stuff I have that I take care of. So that's like, I'm doing Rotman Commerce, Finance and Economics, and I'm on 3 intramural teams, and I currently juggle the core exec position of the VP. So I know that while keeping these habits, my grades won't sink in too low. Like, will never be able to sink in too low to be in a situation where it's like I cannot handle one or the other. And then so anyway, the whole key thing about this is it's important to keep our all of our grades up, and as per all students, especially those who do academics and like extracurriculars or any kind of student leadership positions around campus, it's important, and you guys all know that grades come first, and without grades we cannot do anything else.
All right. So my question's for Damon this time. Ooh, exciting. Something different. Okay, so as vice president, what measures do you plan to take to hold council members accountable, as sometimes this can be very tricky considering they are your peers with various priorities?
Okay, so there was a constitutional review committee meeting a few weeks ago, and this was basically the topic we discussed for like 3 hours, is if we implement the specific motion was, if we implement a system where you can attend meetings online, is there still a way to hold council members accountable to coming to meetings and to still being engaged in the lit activities? And the core thing for me was that we shouldn't be pressuring people to be engaged with the lit. We need to build a culture where the people we're electing want to be engaged in the community that we're creating. And I think that's the core of it. Is this year we have seen a pretty good attendance, and I think one of the reasons for that is because the core exec did a good job creating this culture where people want to be at our meetings, and people want to be at our events, and people want to be at their office hours. And in the past, I know there have been issues with that, but it has been getting better, and I want to evolve on that. So instead of I don't want to use like fear tactics or like these are your punishments if you keep skipping. I want to create a community with the members and with council where people want to be engaged with the lit, and people want to commit themselves to the responsibilities they signed up to when they ran an election. And I think that if we structure the lit in a way where everything that we do is accessible and everything that we do is something that the people involved want to be doing, then I think people will inherently get involved, and I think that's the way to correctly tackle this issue.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a follow-up. I'm sorry, Damon, to do this to you. But what if there is a specific council member who has been, despite you encouraging them in this culture and despite them, wanting to be involved, or to your knowledge wanting to be involved, and despite working really hard to create that positive atmosphere and positive environment, what if you have a council member who is still not holding up their responsibilities, and each time you go to them asking them about it, they have a different excuse about it, but the fact of the matter is this council member isn't holding up their responsibilities, isn't coming out to meetings? How would you handle that situation? Sorry, I had to do it.
So this is actually a good follow-up question. I think the core thing here is to figure out why specifically they don't want to be at the meetings. So I'm going to cite UTSU experience because I do this all the time, but there are a lot of people who stopped coming to UTSU meetings because they just felt like there was no point in and then leave for no reason. They leave because they need to focus on their academics. They need to leave because they don't feel included. They leave because they're not happy with the way things are running. And a lot of that does go back to the culture, but if listening to the person that's doing this and listening to the reasons why they're not involved is the core way to fix this issue. And if the reasons end up being, oh, I don't want to do this, I made a mistake running, then maybe the correct procedure is if they have no valid reason, then there are grievance structures in place. And if it has to be impeachment eventually, it has to be impeachment. Sometimes those tough decisions have to happen. But I think 99.9% of the time, these situations can be solved by listening to the person, figuring out what the issue is, and then resolving the issue instead of just being like, oh, you're not coming to meetings, you're out the door, like you're impeached. That's not how we should be handling things.
Thanks. Sorry, I feel like I'm giving a job interview. Okay.
Okay. So we have about 3 questions left with 1 bonus question at the end if we have time.
How many points is it worth?
10, 100. Okay, so this question came in from a community member for Matt, but maybe we'll try and direct it to both of the presidential candidates. So Matt, earlier this year, the Mental Wellness Initiative Committee agreed to have a zine published, or a little mental health pamphlet, and you had it published before the committee approved it. So as for both candidates, as president, you need to make sure that council is on board with everything you do, and if council isn't on board, it's impossible to get anything done or anything accomplished on your own. So if council has opposing views about what you're doing, how do you plan to address them?
Okay, so as I addressed in the question earlier, that was a mistake, and I will be the first to admit that. In leadership roles, you are put in a position where you can make mistakes on a bigger scale, and not collaborating with MWI, not sharing the final project with them before publication began was a mistake. And I've made plenty. And again, I'll be the first to admit that over my 3 years. But the thing is, with every mistake, I've learned from them. And I have grown as a leader and as a person. And I now know that that was a mistake, and I now know how to do that differently in the future. I know that collaboration between people in a committee, between councils, between experts is important. I now know that I can't just go ahead and do things without approval. But that being said, in the future, my leadership style is not so much top-bottom. It's very collaborative, working within the community, working within committees and commissions and with students, trying to figure out what solutions they want, trying to figure out what the people want to see and bringing that to them. And that's what will happen next year with the new zine, with new projects that we bring forward, with new initiatives. Nothing will be done without consultation first. And that's how democracy works.
Me to answer as well, I guess? Yeah, okay. So I'm not going to address anything like the zine part of the question. I'm going to sort of just explain, how, well, what was the second part of the question so I can address it specifically?
As president, you need to make sure that council is on board with everything you do.
Okay.
If council isn't on board, it's impossible to accomplish anything.
Okay, yeah, so,
No, it's, the question is if council has opposing views about what you're doing, how do you plan to address that? That's
oh, true. Okay, so, okay, I want to touch on the first part and then I want to touch the opposing views thing. So, in general, I'm just going to talk a couple of ways we did that this year to make sure that all councils are on board with everything, every council member is on board with everything, and how we move together as a team, not like one person leading or anything like that. So, for starters, the core exec members, we set up a goal setting and team building retreat in the summer, which hasn't really happened in the past years. We felt that was very important so that council altogether can set goals and a mission that they want to achieve throughout the year. So that's the deputies are being brought into it. We set individual meetings with every single council member and all the deputies. We spoke with them individually while doing all that, making sure no council member, while there's opposing views, is feeling attacked or feeling uncomfortable with what is being said, and really addressing all sides of it. And sometimes not everyone's going to be happy with what the result is, and that's just the fact of it. As core exec, you're going to have to sort of do that, and you have to find something that listens to everyone as much as possible. But you always have to also follow up and come up with better solutions. Because if there's a conflict like that with opposing views, that means you got to follow up afterwards and find better solutions and better approaches in general for the things to come.
okay, cool. Okay. I'll do this one, right? Oh, okay, cool. All right, I'll do this one first. All right. So this is for all candidates, and we'll start on Ramsey's end this time because you guys started last time, I think. Yeah, okay. So for all candidates, how do you intend to reach out to marginalized groups such as international students?
Fantastic question, especially international students part. So, what's important in terms of the international students, I'm going to address just specifically that, is, you got to engage them in the community and make them feel, like they're a part of the community, because they are, just as every other UC student is. Recognize that every international student comes from different cultural backgrounds, and they have different, approaches to how to get engaged and all that kind of stuff. You have to recognize as council and all that kind of stuff that there's different issues that like we all kind of will face, and they all face as well, coming from those backgrounds, and getting them engaged with the community. So part of how I plan on addressing specifically that is, again, throughout over the summer when we do workshops and training for all the execs and council members. It's about bringing that up when we're talking about event planning workshops. We bringing that up. How do we address and attract our international student ground? How do we get them engaged and make them feel like they're part of the community? Do we want to do collaborations with our commissions and stuff that are specifically for international students? Do we want to collaborate with our Office of Student Life in doing events that target specifically international students and get them to come out, such as the great event they had this year at UConnect? And then, you gotta, again, identify that every background is different, so we're gonna have to do as a council different efforts, whether it's maybe regular cultural sort of like events, maybe hosted in collaboration with Equity and Outreach, sort of like, let's do an event New Year, right? Or let's do an event that celebrates this kind of holiday, and it attracts different sort of groups of international students, and then integrate them with our other commission events and find ways that specifically appeal to them.
Okay, great answer. For me, the role of the rep right now is very ill-defined, and because of that, a lot of reps get complacent. They don't know what to do. They take deputy positions, and then not much happens. But in the future, if we specify what the role of the rep should be and how they can be held accountable in representing their constituencies, be it international students, on-campus students, etc., we can do this by the feedback mechanisms, feedback boxes, town halls, but specifically reaching out to international students on platforms that they use. Things like WeChat, advertising on WeChat, our events, advertising on platforms other than Facebook, what our events are, to bring these students into our own community and make them feel like they are a part of our community. One rep this year, Catherine, did a spectacular job of doing that. I want to continue that and make it more sustainable by making it something that's official. As well, as Ramsey was saying, holding events that aren't specifically to celebrate Eurocentric holidays or Eurocentric ideals. Things like the Lunar New Year. These events will make the international community feel at home. They'll bring them into our own community and make UC a home for all of them.
Okay, so the question in specific used international students as an example, but for people who are involved in the lit, they know that this question, this issue goes way beyond just international students. It's something that affects an endless amount of groups on campus, and an endless amount of groups who can't get involved on campus because of life situations. I want to talk specifically about two things. So one, something I said earlier about equity not being a checklist and being a lens or way through which to structure the lit and view what the lit does and how the lit interacts with the membership. That moving from just having one event a year or just running events that reach out to these groups to actually structuring the lit in a way that we can get international students involved, but we can also get other marginalized students involved. That is the way we will handle this. Running events will help, but it's not going to solve the issue that these students just don't feel like they can connect to the lit. A big issue for me, and something that I've also talked about earlier in this debate, is while international students was an example, and it's a good example of a large percentage of the population of UC students who can't get involved, our spaces aren't accessible. They aren't wheelchair accessible, and for people who aren't able-bodied, they just can't come to the lit office right now. Like the lit system we have is inadequate at best. It's not working, it's not doing its job correctly, and there's no other nicer way to put that. One big example for me that I've talked a lot about is if I was not able-bodied right now, I would not be running for VP because our office is in a building that I wouldn't be able to like actively get to, and that is inherently problematic, and it's something that needs to be changed. So this issue goes beyond just international students. It goes beyond just disabled students. It goes to a wide range of students. And as I've said earlier, the way to handle this is not to use a checklist. It's not to run like a quota of events. It's to change the fundamental way that the lit views equity and the fundamental way that the lit interacts with its students into something that actually represents the students and something that actually reaches out and connects with the students.
Everyone's told such great answers that some of my answers I was thinking about already said. I was also considering the fact that, yeah, there's a lot more platforms out there, specifically for international students. They all stick together. Like, I just joined WeChat a week ago, and in the UC 2019 group, it's all just, they all stick together, they laugh, they have a good time, they have their own community there. I think it's good to just try to incorporate those communities. One thing that can be considered is maybe discussion on having an international rep. I'm not too familiar with all the constitutional changes and whatnot, but there's discussion for adding positions that could benefit international students and various other positions that aren't considered as much as they should be. And yeah, so platforms to be reached out to, like WeChat and other things that would actually be sustainable is important to consider, and events, like Damon said, are a starting point. So events that could be done with equity and outreach and even spirited communication, so kind of like a spirited day for a specific holiday could be something that is considered with the commissioners next year. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so last question before Emil's question. So this is for all candidates, and we'll start from this end this time. Okay, so since there is a possibility that the referendum will pass, and therefore new student lounge and cafe in 376 will be implemented, do you think it should be student-run? And if so, how will you go about running it, considering the role you would be in and what you're running for now, and ensuring it becomes financially stable?
Okay, so this year the core execs had the pleasure of revamping Diablos from what happened last year, it just not starting up the first semester, and then last year it was taken over the second semester by UC Food Services. I have experience with the other core execs in basically helping set up the foundations, the applications, the financial tools, and so I think it should definitely be another student-run coffee shop that's also bringing jobs into UC and bring more of a community to enter UC and hang out in the lounge. Sorry, can you repeat the question specifically in terms of what you want?
How will you go about running it, considering the role you would be in, and ensuring it becomes financially stable?
Okay. Yeah, so it would pretty much go through a similar process that Diablos went through. They also went through renovations this year, so it'd be a lot of renovating, it'd be a lot of communication and meetings with the admin to make sure that everything is cooperating, and hiring processes for the managers, and I'd say they definitely need some sort of accounting person for that, but if they ever need any help in terms of organizing that, I'm always here to help out because I have that experience.
And how they could turn it from what it was last year into a success this year. So speaking to Amanda, speaking to Snow, speaking to Ramsey, speaking to the people in admin involved, I think that would be the core way. But one of the big things for me is if UC students are paying for the renovation to create a new coffee lounge in 376, UC students should be the ones working in that lounge. Like, those jobs should go towards UC students, and that's something that's really important to me in the foundation of this space. And also, UC voices should be the ones that are kind of forming the actual lounge. So one thing I hear a lot with Diablos is, oh, does Diablo sell this? Or why doesn't Diablo sell X? Or why is this so expensive? Or this is so cheap? And things like that often fall on deaf ears. They're often just like said in the CSC or said in the JCR. They're not ever actually formally brought up to anyone. And that's something that really needs to change with this new coffee lounge, is listen to how UC students want this place structured, because UC students will be the ones that are studying there. UC students will be the ones that are paying for the coffee there and like supporting it financially. So that is something that really needs to go into this, is UC voices, and also make sure that if we are paying, if UC students are the ones paying for this, UC students are the ones that are being employed there.
Great answers so far. For me, what will be key in this project before we decide what we want it to be, what we want it to sell, we have to consult with the students and figure that out. This can't be a top-bottom thing, because we need to understand that if we have another cafe, this could potentially take business away from Diablos. And that's not what we want to do. We want them to fill different niches. That being said, I think that in order for it to be successful, we need inventory, we need tracking, we need analysis of what sells, what doesn't sell, how many to order, much like is going on with Diablos this year under Snow and Amanda and Ramsey and Andrea, the manager. Working with the people who successfully run Diabs will be key, and as well, as Snow mentioned, an accountant. Someone to manage the finances and make sure everything is in check, who reports to the LIT. As well, accountability to the LIT. This coffee shop, much like Diabs, is should be self-sustainable. The LIT shouldn't have to bail this coffee shop out every year, much like it has had to do with Diabs in the past. And how we're going to do that is through infrastructure to make sure that we are selling what the students want in the right quantities, that we're not overbuying and underselling. As well, another thing to consider, at Vic, is anyone here familiar with a cafe called Caffeines? They run on a volunteer basis. They have people scheduled in for like an hour shift here, an hour shift here. It's completely voluntary. That saves them a lot of money. That is an option that we can look into. These are options that we will look into when we collaborate with the UC students and with the people who are currently successfully running Diablos to figure out what we want this space to be for the students.
Okay, so great answer so far. I'm just gonna go off a bit what sort of Snow said in a way. So as CoreExec this year, me, Snow, and Amanda, we got to experience the great basically challenge to start Diablos from scratch and create a sustainable financial system and give it a whole new look and do all that, make sure it stays on point throughout the year. So do I want it to be student run? Absolutely. How is that going to work with Diablos in hand? It's going to be an extension of Diablos in a way. We don't know if we're going to call it Diablos or not, but that's it'll be an extension, so it'll be like, very connected in that sort of way. And they do, a different crowd. So the one in the JCR, that's for the students who are there to like study and relax. There's also the crowd near the new library and the student lounge over there for the new coffee shop. So how do you go about setting this up? It's a very long and complicated process, and making sure it stays sustainable. So how I imagine the structure of the management going to be. So we currently have a manager for Diablos. How next year let's say it gets implemented. So we get that manager again for Diablos, and we have a financial manager or analyst that keeps on top of the Diablos accounting stuff and all their finances throughout the year. Same thing for Diablos 2.0, I'm going to call it. So that's another manager and another financial person. Now, how to connect those two? You have another manager, so like a sort of a head manager that sort of acts as a connection between both coffee shops, because it's going to be run very similarly, and but there's also going to be some very small differences that they're going to have to communicate with each other. Now, how do you go about setting it up? You gotta go for the business license, so federal, provincial, and municipal stuff. You gotta do a director change with all those on the LIT, so the CoreExec members. You gotta collaborate with our chief administrative officer to make sure everything's in place. You gotta collaborate. You gotta set up a whole new POS system, so that you gotta collaborate with our tech crew at UC. You gotta collaborate with academic services, because that's how you get payrolls out. And and for a coffee shop to run smoothly and effectively, you're gonna have to compensate those who are working there and giving their time to doing the best they can. And then you gotta work with UC Food Services as well to start getting set up and get sort of guidance for them as well. And then there's also the bank, 100%, and a student admin, which we are always in communication with. So Scott and Melinda. Now finally, after that's set up, you gotta make sure it keeps financially stable throughout the year. We have systems in place right now where we regularly check how much we make every hour and how much every item makes, and we've been making regular adjustments every month with that. We're gonna keep the same sort of system, doing that over there. And then, as well, regular board meetings. So bi-monthly board meetings. For those who don't know, there's a Diablos board. Currently, we'd have the same thing set up for this other coffee shop, or maybe even have 2 separate board meetings, or 2 separate boards, and like a third sort of board that connects the two. So you'd have regular board meetings to keep up with the managers, little quirks that they're hitting and obstacles and little feedbacks they're getting. And then finally, doing all that as well, you gotta, like Damon hit and Matt as well hit very strongly upon this. You gotta apply feedback from the students, and you gotta give them an open avenue for them to do that. So if the students really don't like the chocolate chip cookies, they gotta be able to say that I don't like that, for example, even if it's making good or bad money, and applying those and finding ways to improve on that. So that's sort of how this big structure kind of works, and it's gonna take a lot of collaboration from like everyone at GC, and that's something I know like the back of my hand right now.
This is the last question. As we know, the American election season's in full swing. Which candidate would be your choice for president of the United States? Why? And what does this say about you and your leadership skills as a student?
Trump.
Okay. I'm probably not probably not as up to date with everything going on compared to the other candidates up here. But I personally think that the values of the Democrats are where I see myself and where I see UC. I think it's about being open, and their economic and social and all of their issues that they target are things that I believe in too. But as for the candidates running currently in the Democrats, I still I've yet to make any decision. I can't vouch for either of them, but I see what they stand for, and I think if I continue keeping up with the race, I can make a decision at some point. But I'm sorry that my answer is not what you wanted.
Okay, so I'm gonna have a hard time kind of relating this back, but if I was an American that did vote in the elections, I would vote for Bernie Sanders. Sorry, Ryan. So it's kind of hard to relate that back to student council election. I guess the only way I could really do that is something I talked about earlier on. Is I've never run in a lit election before. I'm not the person that was the person that's climbing the ladder that's supposed to be vice president or whatever, and that's kind of similar to Sanders' idea of I am the anti-establishment. I am Hillary Clinton is given the presidential spot, and that's it's a very big issue, especially in the lit. Is we have predetermined people. That's what it always feels like in these elections. And as someone who's never run a lit election before, I can say that I felt a lot of nobody is running against me, and that sucks. But I did feel a lot of pressure when I was first discussing running for VP. It's oh, but I'm not a part of the lit clique, whatever that is. I'm not in that circle. Can I still run for this position? Will people hate me? Am I going against someone that's predetermined to be VP? I don't know, stuff like that. It relates a lot back to the U.S. elections, but it's kind of a hard question to answer. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Will said he'd give me $5 if I did the Jeb Bush please clap thing, so please clap. Sorry, Will. But, going off something that David said, there is always in
most elections, an established natural next president in this case. There is a natural next choice, the one who is destined, predetermined for the position. And the establishment candidate, for lack of a better term. I am challenging that. I am challenging the logical progression of promotion from working up the ladder. I want to knock the ladder down. I want to make these positions open and available to everyone, no matter where you stand on the lit. And if I had to compare directly, because my campaign is about collaborative leadership for the students, from the students, I too would have to say I will be voting for Bernie Fieldburn Sanders, running on a revolutionary campaign of hope, change, and radical democratization.
Okay, so it's kind of funny that I'm also going to say Bernie Sanders. I think a lot of us here in this room are also going to say Bernie Sanders. So there's, and again, it's going to be hard to kind of relate it back, but here's a few things I'm going to try to touch upon. So Bernie Sanders is very sort of grassroots movement. It speaks to me. He's very for like stuff like lower tuition, more equity, which is something that's very important to me as well, and I think important to the UC community in general. So equity in terms of like racial equity, financial equity, and like every kind of equity. Bernie Sanders in general is the best choice for students, so that's sort of where it speaks to me as well. Transparency is a very key value to Bernie, feel the burn. And then as well, Bernie Sanders has most experience with different aspects of the White House, which is something I'd like to also that's where I can try to relate more to me as well. So I have experience from different aspects of, I guess, the UC community. I've touched like the Rotman community. I've been in orientation. I've been in the commuter community, and I've gained all that experience, and I want to bring it back to the students, just the same way Bernie wants to do that. I agree. There's definitely an issue right now in terms of when it comes to running for exec and core exec positions. How students are automatically turned off as to like I'm not on the lit right now, or maybe I'm not right for this. But it starts with changing the culture of the lit at first, and engaging students and making them, and not only encouraging them, but making them, want to learn more about what the lit does and and how we function, all that kind of stuff. Because after all, it's the students that really get most involved in terms of the community, and are most passionate about that, and are most experienced with that kind of stuff. With their involvement, those are the ones who end up saying, okay, I think I'm ready to do a big position like core exec, what I mean? And it was unfortunate.
I hate Kanye.
Yeah, do I.
All right, closing statements.
1 minute.
Okay, well, thank you guys for sitting through this. I don't know how long it was, but I'm sure it was quite long. So, just in closing, I'm running for finance commissioner. I did it this year as well, and I just want to keep improving, and I really, really care about the financial stability of the lit. And I hope I can be as accountable as I'm this year and improve even more next year for the community. I don't know, I don't have too much else to say, but I really hope that you can see my passion for making the LIT's finances go smoothly. Thank you.
Hi. I'm Damon, running for VP. Thank you for sitting through that. It was an hour and 40 minutes. It is my second year at U of T, so it's my second time ever seeing something like this happen. Last year, the turnout was not great, so I'm very glad to see, even if it's died down a little bit from the start, I'm very glad to see that there are this many people that sat through an hour and 40 minutes of us speaking. It really makes me happy to see that people are getting engaged. I've went over a lot of what I want to do, a lot of the issues I have with the lit and how I want to change that, a lot of what I like about the lit and how I want to keep that going. So please don't vote no.
I've been a commissioner for 2 years now. I've been a rep once. I'm ready for this challenge. I feel like UC is ready for this challenge. Challenge the established way of things. The lit does not have to be something external to the students. It doesn't have to be something lording over the students. It can work collaboratively within the student body. And that's the change that I am promising to bring. Vote for Matt Thomas.
Okay, so I'm gonna begin also the same way. Thank everyone for coming out today. I know it's a lot of it took a lot of your time. You guys all have probably better things to do when it comes to like studying. So it's really, really great that you guys all came out. I'd like to thank the candidates for coming out as well, and really giving very great answers to all the stuff. Clearly, everyone here is very passionate about the lit and about the community. And I'd like to also thank Matt Thomas for luckily, we're the only ones that are, contested, and hope to see in the future years every position be contested. That's very important. In general, I encourage you all to inform yourselves on all of our platforms here today, and to encourage you all to especially go out and vote for the referendum and for the elections in general. So my name is Ramsey. I'm the current Vice President of the Lit. I've gained experience since my first year in doing everything I can for the UC community, and I want to bring this passion again back to the Lit next year as President. If you haven't gotten a chance to check out my platform, please go to voteforramsey.me to check it out. Shoot me any questions you'd like. And yes, please vote for Ramsey. One last thing also before I forget. And I've asked all UC students when I was going campaigning as well. Once everyone's wrapping up, if you guys want to take whoever who feel like to come up later after this, write one or two words as to what would you like to see at UC next year, or what do you currently like about UC now. Just write a couple of words on that, and that would mean a lot to me. I like to keep this as well as possible. So thanks very much, guys.
Yay! Thanks everyone for coming. You guys rock. Go let your spine relax. It's not good to sit for